Military records can tell us so much about our ancestors, and they can be great resources for our genealogy research. But how do we know if an ancestor even served in the military? In this video, I'm going to show you sources that are great for giving clues about military service. The neat thing is, some of these sources you might already be using, but you just need to look at a little differently. One thing to look at is your ancestor's obituary. Sometimes you'll get lucky and your ancestor's obituary will actually spell out his military service. Like in this obituary for Dr. E.W. Bryan. It actually says in the headline that he was a veteran of the Spanish-American War. But sometimes obituaries didn't spell out military service in such an obvious way. Take, for example, this obituary of Henry Clay Ruby. Nowhere in this obituary does it actually state that he was a veteran of the Civil War, but I know that he was. Notice that it says that he was a member of the O.P. Morton Post of the Grand Army of the Republic. The Grand Army of the Republic was an organization of honorably discharged Union veterans. So if Henry Clay Ruby was a member of the Grand Army of the Republic, logic would say that he was an honorably discharged Union veteran. This is something that we really need to be in the habit of whenever we're looking at a source. Who are all of the people mentioned in that source? What are all the places? What are all of the organizations? If this was your ancestor's obituary and you didn't know what the Grand Army of the Republic was, taking just a couple of minutes to research it and finding out what it was can really give you those great clues. Also, pay attention if his obituary or his death record says that he died in a veteran's home or a soldier's home. We can also find clues to military service in the cemetery. Sometimes an ancestor's tombstone will make it obvious that they were a veteran. Sometimes his service is even spelled out.
Yeah, I think he served.
But just like those obituaries, sometimes we need to read a little more carefully. And that includes reading the symbols. Now, I don't mean for this to sound like something out of the Da Vinci Code, but those symbols that are on an ancestor's tombstone can really have a lot of meaning. Sometimes you'll see a symbol for a specific organization. Like this one, again, which is the symbol of the Grand Army of the Republic. But also pay attention to symbols that sort of look military or look patriotic, such as crossed flags, crossed swords, or crossed rifles. One symbol that you do want to be careful of, though, is an anchor. A lot of times people will see an anchor on an ancestor's tombstone and think, oh, he must have served in the Navy, or maybe he had an occupation that was somehow nautical. But oftentimes the anchor wasn't used to show naval service or a nautical occupation. It's actually a symbol of faith. Going back to a biblical reference of faith in God being the anchor of the soul. So the anchor then becomes used on the tombstone as a symbol of that person's faith. While you're there at the cemetery, also be on the lookout for those little metal medallions that are sometimes stuck near a tombstone. Sometimes local veterans organizations or local scout troops will place those medallions or those flag holders near the tombstones of veterans. But be careful. Some of those medallions have a way of ending up in front of the wrong tombstones. Another source that can give you clues about military service is the U.S. Census. In the 1950 census, random people on a page were asked supplemental questions. So first, pay attention to see what line your ancestor was on to see if they were asked some of those supplemental questions. Those questions are down at the bottom of the page. One of those supplemental questions asked men if they had served in the U.S. Armed Forces. Notice I said men. If a woman fell on one of those lines that got asked the supplemental questions, they didn't ask her about any military service. It was only asked of the men. They also asked supplemental questions in the 1940 census. They asked men if they were a veteran of the U.S. military forces. Women were asked if they were the wife or widow of a veteran, or if it was a child under the age of 18, they would ask if their father was a veteran. Again, completely ignoring the fact that women did serve in the military. The 1930 census asked about military service and gave specific abbreviations for different conflicts that the person had served in. The 1910 census asked about Civil War service. All the way over on the right-hand side of the page, over in column 30, it asked if the person was a veteran of the Union Army or Union Navy, Confederate Army, or Confederate Navy. Now, do be careful when you're looking at those abbreviations, because this is also the area where the Census Bureau made notations as they were compiling statistics. If you go all the way back to the 1840 census, there was actually a column where they were supposed to record the name and age of Revolutionary War pensioners. One of the challenging things about the 1840 census is that you have the name of the head of household, but then everyone else is just listed with tick marks indicating gender and their age group. What's neat about the 1840 census listing those Revolutionary War pensioners by name is that he might not be the person who is actually the head of household. He might be living with one of his children, and that son or son-in-law or daughter-in-law is actually the head of household. So sometimes you can actually pick up another name of somebody in that 1840 census besides just that head of household. If you're researching someone who you think might have been a Civil War veteran, take a look at the 1890 Special Schedule of Union Veterans and Widows. Now, this special schedule only exists for about half of Kentucky and then alphabetically through the rest of the states. It's not going to give you a ton of biographical detail, but it could be enough of a clue to get you going to look for more clues about military service. As you're doing your research, also be on the lookout for clues about somebody being a member of a lineage society, such as the Daughters of the American Revolution. Sometimes membership is mentioned in an obituary or could appear on a tombstone. Now, she isn't the one who was the Revolutionary War patriot, but she has proven her descent from someone who was. So in this case, you could contact the Daughters of the American Revolution and see who her proven Revolutionary War patriot is. Sometimes you'll be lucky enough to find reference to a woman being a real daughter. This means that her father is a proven Revolutionary War patriot. If you're researching someone who served in the American Civil War, you'll want to take your research a little further and identify what regiment he served in, because that's going to help you open up a ton more records. And in this video here, I have some resources that will help you identify that regiment, so go check that out. Happy researching!